There is a specific kind of silence that exists only in the Tasmanian wilderness. Not the absence of sound, but something heavier, something that presses in on you. The quiet of ancient horizontal scrub, of towering ferns older than recorded history, slowly reclaiming anything that dares to disappear among them. For 840 days, this silence was all that remained of Céline Cremer. In June of 2023, the world watched as an enormous search operation descended on Tasmania's remote northwest. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging swept over endless green. Specialist ground crews pushed through razor-thick bushland. Experienced trackers followed what little could be followed until there was nothing left. They were searching for a 31-year-old Belgian woman who had vanished without warning. Her car was found locked. Her trail ended abruptly. Beyond it was only forest. After weeks of relentless effort, authorities reached a conclusion that felt final. The terrain was too dense, the weather too volatile. Survival, they said, was unlikely. The physical search was scaled back, then suspended. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the case went quiet. The forest had won. Or so it seemed. Because silence, in cases like this, is never permanent. It's only a pause. In the final days of 2025, while most of the world was distracted by holidays and countdowns, a small group of people were deep in the mud, staring at the ground. They weren't police. They weren't part of any official search unit. They were civilians, outsiders. Led by a filmmaker named Rob Parsons, they carried no badges, no authority, just cameras, maps, and a refusal to believe that a person could simply be erased. And then, in a place that had already been searched, cleared even, they saw it. A small object, mud-caked, weather-beaten, impossible. A mobile phone, Celine's phone. In that moment, everything changed. This wasn't just a forgotten piece of electronics. It wasn't debris or coincidence. It was a rupture in the story we had been told for more than 2 years. A digital ghost, resurfacing from the wilderness with a single haunting implication. If a private citizen could find the one object that mattered most deep inside terrain deemed unsurvivable, what else had been missed? To understand why this discovery is so unsettling, you have to understand the Tarkine. This is not ordinary bushland. It is one of the last truly wild places on Earth, a maze of fallen trees stacked like barricades, moss-covered logs hiding deep sinkholes beneath them, vegetation so dense it forms a false floor. You can walk across it without ever touching soil. Every step is a gamble, every meter fought for. When Tasmanian police suspended their search in 2023, they did so with confidence. They described the bush as impenetrable. They described the conditions as unforgiving. They described a landscape capable of swallowing evidence whole. And for 2.5 years, that explanation stood unchallenged. Until now. Because here was the evidence. Not buried, not destroyed, sitting in the palm of a filmmaker's hand. For Celine's family in Belgium, those 840 days were spent in a state psychologists call ambiguous loss. A limbo where there is no body to mourn, no certainty to cling to, no ending to accept. They were told the wilderness was a locked vault, that nothing more could be done. The phone shattered that belief. It transformed a cold case into an active question. It shifted the narrative from lost forever to something far more uncomfortable, hiding in plain sight. This discovery doesn't just promise GPS data or a final photo. It offers something far more confronting. A mirror. One that forces us to look back at the original investigation and ask how the most advanced tools available failed, while a small team of determined civilians succeeded. Was it luck, or was it strategy? The Tasmanian wilderness is not static. It moves. It reshapes itself with every storm. Rain collapses paths, trees fall and raise landmarks. What was visible one month can vanish the next. It is a living antagonist, one that guards its secrets fiercely and breaks most who challenge it. To locate something as small as a phone after 2 winters of relentless rain, wind, and cold should be statistically impossible. It's the needle in the haystack. If the haystack were the size of a mountain range and made of thorns, and yet, the impossible happened. As investigators now examine the data recovered from that device, a new timeline is beginning to form. One that may contradict what authorities believed about Celine's final hours. This is no longer just a missing persons case. It is a reassessment, a reopening, a quiet reckoning. The silence of the Tarkin has been broken, and what the forest has been forced to give up may be more than anyone is ready for. This is not a retelling of a tragedy. This is the documentation of a turning point, the moment where static gives way to signal. How did a filmmaker find what police could not? And now that Celine's phone has been recovered, where is Celine? The mystery of Philosopher Falls didn't end in 2023. It was only waiting for someone patient enough to listen to the dirt. Now, the earth is speaking, and the world is finally listening. In the world of professional search and rescue, there exists a rigid hierarchy of expertise. Police units, state emergency services, thermal imaging specialists, forensic analysts, every role defined by protocol, budgets, and risk assessments. Decisions are made by committees. Actions are governed by liability. And then there are the outsiders. The ones who operate without authority, without funding, and without permission, driven instead by something far more volatile, an unshakable sense of responsibility to a stranger they never knew. This is where Rob Parsons enters the story. To understand why Rob Parsons succeeded where a multi-agency government operation failed, you have to understand who he is and who he isn't. He isn't a badge-carrying investigator. He isn't a thrill-seeker chasing attention. He isn't an influencer documenting danger for clicks. Rob Parsons is a filmmaker, yes, but more importantly, he's an experienced bushman with an intimate, almost instinctive understanding of Tasmania's wild places. When most people look at a map of the Tarkin and see a solid block of green, an impossible zone, Parsons sees a structure. He sees gradients, drainage lines, movement patterns. He doesn't see chaos. He sees a puzzle that hasn't been approached correctly. For the public, Céline Cremer's story faded quietly by the end of 2023. Headlines moved on. Attention drifted elsewhere. But for Parsons, the case never settled. It lingered. Not as a mystery, but as a contradiction. The idea that a woman could vanish inside a relatively defined search area and leave absolutely nothing behind didn't sit right with him. It violated the rules of the bush, and it violated logic. In environments like the Tarkin, people don't simply disappear, they leave traces. Something breaks, something drops, something marks the landscape, unless no one is looking in the right way. Parsons began to revisit the case not emotionally, but analytically. He treated it the way a filmmaker treats a flawed edit. Something essential was missing. A sequence didn't line up. The narrative jumped ahead without explanation. So he went backward. He spent months deconstructing the original search from 2023. He studied GPS tracks from ground teams, helicopter flight paths, weather records, rainfall intensity, visibility conditions. He noticed something critical. The official search was enormous, but that scale came at a cost. When dozens of people move through dense bushland, they generate noise. They focus on efficiency, on coverage, on obvious routes. They walk upright, they move fast, they search for what is expected to be found. Parsons worked differently. He embraced the small lens, moving slowly, crouching, crawling, sitting in one place long enough for the environment to reveal itself. He wasn't trying to conquer the landscape. He was trying to read it, and he wasn't alone. Parsons' work intersected with that of Ken Gamble, a Sydney-based private investigator known for taking on cases the system has quietly abandoned. Gamble had been working closely with Celine's family in Belgium, pushing from the digital and legal side. Data, timelines, unanswered procedural questions. Parsons became the physical extension of that effort. Boots on the ground. A partnership between structured investigation and raw local intuition. It wasn't a publicity move. It wasn't interference. It was persistence. Critics would later call Parsons obsessive, reckless. Some would accuse him of undermining official work. But history shows that many breakthroughs in unresolved cases come from people who refuse to accept the institutional exhaustion as a conclusion. Parsons wasn't searching for fame. He was searching for closure because the story didn't feel finished. He had seen Celine's photos, the smile, the confidence, the love of the outdoors. And he couldn't reconcile that life with the idea of her being reduced to a footnote, lost somewhere unnamed in the bush. By December of 2025, his efforts had intensified. He returned to the Philosopher Falls area again and again, often alone or with a small team, sometimes in conditions that would turn experienced hikers back. His attention narrowed onto a section labeled Area B, a zone officially marked as cleared during the original search. In the Tarkine, cleared doesn't mean empty. It means someone passed through once. Vegetation here grows in layers. Ferns form canopies that hide the ground entirely. Moss blankets fallen trees so completely they disappear into the landscape. You can stand 3 feet from a brightly colored object and never see it, because the forest bends light, shadows, and depth perception. Parsons understood this. His approach became forensic. He wasn't just walking, he was dissecting. He studied broken branches, how a snap caused by human weight differs from storm damage. He looked for unnatural straight lines in a world of curves. He noticed the disturbances others would step over. He applied the eye of a cinematographer to the randomness of nature. He knew something else too. If Céline dropped anything, it wouldn't be on the trail. Trails are where people search. It would be in the margins, the places the eye avoids, the spaces fear pushes people into. Parsons began tracking what he called the topography of fear. Where would a disoriented person go? Where would panic override logic? Where would instinct lead someone trying to escape discomfort, cold, or confusion? Every return to the Tarkine carried risk. Weather could shift violently in minutes. Rain could turn tracks into traps. Slippery drops hid beneath moss. Wait a while vines grabbed and held. The bush doesn't forgive mistakes. But Parsons believed that something fundamental had been overlooked. The original search focused on where Céline should have gone. He was looking for where she would have gone. While official conclusions from 2023 remained unchanged, Parsons continued quietly, methodically, patiently, proving step by step that the forest doesn't hide evidence forever. It hides it only from those unwilling to slow down. By late 2025, whispers began circulating among online communities, among followers of the case, among those paying close attention. Parsons hadn't just found fragments or possibilities. He had found something real, something definitive. The protagonist of this story isn't a man with authority or accolades. He's a figure in a high-visibility jacket, soaked in Tasmanian rain, hands stained with mud, carrying a camera, and now carrying hope. Rob Parsons didn't just recover a phone. He found a thread. And once pulled, that thread would begin to unravel everything we thought we knew about what happened at Philosopher Falls. Because the phone was never the answer. It was the key. And once that key existed, there was no going back. To step into the Tarkine is to step out of time. This is not a forest you visit. It's a fortress you infiltrate. When Rob Parsons and his team returned to the Philosopher Falls area in late 2025, they weren't just searching for an object. They were conducting a forensic audit of the landscape itself. The original 2023 search had been a race against time. In the first days after a disappearance, the goal is Rescue. You move fast, you cover ground, you shout names into the wind and hope for an answer. Speed matters, visibility matters, but by 2025, that urgency was gone. What replaced it was something colder, sharper, and far more deliberate. This was no longer about saving a life. It was about understanding a place and what it had done with a human being. The challenge of the Tarkin cannot be overstated. In most parts of the world, dense forest means trees and undergrowth. In Tasmania, it means layers. A multi-story labyrinth. There is the canopy overhead, thick enough to blot out the sky. Beneath that, a mid-story of tree ferns and horizontal scrub woven together like wire. And then there is the ground, if you can call it that. Often, it isn't ground at all, but a false floor of fallen logs, leaf litter, and rot, stacked so deeply it can reach 6 feet down. A person, or an object, can step into a gap between roots and simply vanish, swallowed into a pocket beneath the surface, invisible even if you are standing directly above it. This was the living antagonist Rob Parsons had chosen to confront. The team's strategy revolved around a complete rethinking of the last known point. In 2023, everything had been anchored to Celine's car, found at the Philosopher Falls car park. From there, the search radiated outward, based on the assumption that she had stayed on the marked trails or drifted only slightly into the surrounding bush. The re-investigation asked a harder question. What if she hadn't? What if the weather, the freezing rain that battered the Tarkine in the days after her disappearance, had transformed those trails into flowing channels of water? What if staying on them became impossible? When you're cold, soaked, and running out of daylight, logic collapses. You don't follow maps, you follow instinct, you look for shelter, you move away from exposure, not toward it. Parsons and his team began to trace what they called the line of least resistance. When panic sets in, people don't climb. They descend. They follow gravity. They slip into gullies. They seek hollows beneath ancient myrtles where the wind dies down and the rain feels less punishing. That shift in perspective changed everything. Physically, the work was brutal. Every meter forward had to be earned. The bush here is choked with bawara. Locals call it tanglefoot, a wiry, grasping shrub that behaves like a natural snare. It grabs ankles, hooks clothing, pulls you off balance. Vision drops 2 inches. Progress slows to a crawl. At times, the team advanced no more than 50 meters in an hour. And with every movement came tension. Every time someone bent down to peel back moss or separate leaf litter, the entire group seemed to hold its breath. They weren't just looking for a lost phone, they were searching for something that had endured more than 900 days of rain, frost, and decay. Something the forest should have erased. The psychological weight of this re-investigation was immense, especially when contrasted with the technology used in 2023. Drones, helicopters, infrared cameras. On paper, it was a state-of-the-art operation. But the Tarkin doesn't care about technology. The canopy is too dense for heat signatures to reach the forest floor. High-resolution cameras see nothing but green. The tools that work everywhere else fail here. Parsons understood that the only sensor capable of finding the truth was the human eye, 6 inches from the mud. As they pushed deeper into zones officially marked as cleared, the cracks in the original search became visible. Certain areas, steep embankments, narrow crevices, vertical drops near the falls, had been deprioritized in 2023. Too dangerous, too unlikely, too slow. Parsons leaned into those spaces. With specialized rigging and team members experienced in vertical terrain, they accessed places others had written off. Where the original search avoided risk, this one embraced it. Because in a place like the Tarkine, danger and evidence often occupy the same ground. They were also fighting something less visible, the dead zone of the mind. In search and rescue, there is a moment, often unspoken, when you stop looking for a person and start looking for a scene. The brain narrows its expectations. It filters out anything that doesn't resemble a body or a backpack. Parsons actively resisted that shift. He reframed the search. Look for the unnatural, he told them. A straight edge in a world of curves, plastic among bark, a zipper pull, a button, the wrong shade of blue, anything that didn't belong. December 2025 brought weather eerily similar to the conditions of 2023. Cold rain, low cloud, bone-deep dampness, leeches clinging to exposed skin, mist hanging in the air like smoke. It felt as if the forest was replaying the day Céline vanished. And in a strange way, that mattered. The conditions became data. They allowed the team to experience the disorientation firsthand. They understood how the roar of Philosopher Falls, normally a navigational anchor, can become overwhelming, flattening sound and direction until everything feels the same. Forward, backward, left, right, all lost in white noise. Throughout the process, Parsons remained in constant contact with Ken Gamble. While the team battled the bush, Gamble worked the data, cross-referencing their movements against the faint cellular pings recorded in 2023. The phone's brief connection to nearby towers had always been weak, placing Céline somewhere on the fringe of coverage. By mapping those signal strengths onto the terrain, a pattern emerged. A narrow V in the landscape, a drainage line, overlooked, dismissed, considered a dead end. But dead ends are where things settle. Here, the reinvestigation crossed a threshold. This was no longer just walking and observing, it became excavation. Layer by layer, leaf litter was peeled back like pages from a book no one had read in years. The air changed. The silence felt different, no longer heavy, but charged. The team knew they were close. They were about to prove something fundamental. That the wilderness doesn't just take, it holds. And if you're willing to slow down enough, if you're willing to suffer through mud, cold and tanglefoot, it may eventually allow you to see what it's been guarding. The world was about to learn that the impenetrable forest had a witness, and that witness was made of glass and silicon buried beneath 2 years of Tasmanian rot. In the world of investigative recovery, there is a moment professionals call the click. It's the instant when chaos gives way to intention, when the natural world suddenly reveals something that does not belong. A straight line where there should only be curves. For Rob Parsons and his team, that moment came in the humid, suffocating air of late December 2025. They were working near the base of a steep, unnamed gully, just a few hundred meters from the main Philosopher Falls track. This wasn't a place hikers wander into by accident. Reaching it required a descent that was closer to a controlled slide than a walk. The ground was unstable, layered with rotting bark and slick quartzite that offered no forgiveness for missteps. But Parsons had been drawn to this drainage line for a reason. During heavy rainfall, runoff from the surrounding ridges naturally funneled into this gully. Water, debris, and anything loose on the slope above would eventually be carried here. If Céline had dropped something uphill, or if the weather had forced her downward, this was where the mountain would deposit it. The discovery itself wasn't cinematic. There was no flash of reflected light, no dramatic reveal. The canopy overhead was far too thick for that. Instead, it was a subtle disruption in texture. One of the team members was clearing debris near the base of a massive myrtle tree, its roots sprawling outward like the limbs of something ancient and watchful. Amid the dark, organic decay of the forest floor, he noticed a shape that didn't quite belong. Rectangular, flat, wrong. It was coated in thick, clay-like mud. So completely camouflaged, it looked more like a stone than an object. When the mud was carefully wiped away, the reality landed all at once. It was a mobile phone. The gully went silent. No shouting, no celebration, just the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone present. After 840 days of theories, speculation, and unanswered questions, Here was something solid, something real. A physical piece of Céline Cremer returned to the world. The device was in shockingly intact condition. Despite surviving two of the harshest Tasmanian winters in years, rain, frost and decay, it hadn't been crushed or shattered. It hadn't been carried far by water. It had been held in place, gently cradled by the same moss and leaf litter that concealed it. This wasn't just a needle in a haystack. It was a needle that had endured a hurricane. As the initial shock faded, a darker realization settled in. The location wasn't unreachable. It was difficult, yes. Grueling, certainly. But it lay well within the boundaries of the original 2023 search grid. Official logs showed that this area had been marked as cleared, swept by ground crews, observed from the air, scanned by infrared. So how did it remain unseen? How could a multi-million-dollar search operation, equipped with helicopters and advanced imaging, miss a bright rectangular object resting in a drainage line? The phone was treated with immediate reverence. On the advice of Ken Gamble, it was not powered on. No buttons pressed, no risks taken. It was sealed inside a Faraday bag to prevent any signal interference or remote data loss, and kept in a controlled environment. In digital forensics, moisture is both enemy and witness. If water had breached the internal flash memory, the data could be gone forever. But if it hadn't, if even fragments survived, this device represented the most significant digital breadcrumb trail ever recovered in the case. The discovery shifted everything. This was no longer a search for remains. It became a search for sequence, for movement, for decisions. The phone held the potential to reveal Celine's final GPS points, her last messages, her attempts, if any, to reach help. It could answer whether she was moving and searching for signal, or stationary and waiting for rescue that never came. As the team made their way out of the bush that evening, the phone felt heavier than any equipment in their packs. They understood what they had done. They had reopened a wound the system had quietly closed. They had delivered a breakthrough that experts had deemed impossible. But the phone was only part of the story. Its location carried a chilling implication. If the phone was here, at the base of this gully, then Céline was likely nearby. The search radius had collapsed from kilometers to meters. The forest had given up its first secret, and it suggested there was more still hidden. The needle had been found. Now the haystack had to be faced one last time, because the phone wasn't just evidence. It was an indictment, a silent reminder that the truth doesn't vanish. It waits, and eventually, no matter how deep it's buried, it finds its way back to the surface. The discovery was over. The reckoning was about to begin. When news of the discovery broke, it didn't just ripple through the true crime community. It struck Tasmanian authorities like a seismic shock. For 2.5 years, the official position had been clear. The wilderness made further answers impossible. The forest was portrayed as a perfect vault, hostile, impenetrable, and final. But the moment Rob Parsons emerged from the Tarkine carrying a mud-stained phone, that narrative collapsed under its own weight. The aftermath of the discovery revealed a stark divide. On one side is a family in Belgium, led by Celine's sister, who have moved from suspended grief into relentless focus. For them, the phone is not just evidence, it is a bridge back to Céline herself. The first tangible object tied directly to her final moments, untouched by interpretation, unfiltered by reports. It represents hope, but it also carries an unbearable truth, that for 840 days, an answer lay hidden in a gully, waiting for someone willing to look closer. On the other side is institutional reckoning. The discovery has reignited the difficult questions about modern search and rescue doctrine. How does a state-funded operation, supported by infrared-equipped helicopters and specialized units, miss a phone in an area officially marked as cleared? Why did technology replace patience? Why did speed replace scrutiny? Calls are now growing for an independent review of the 2023 search. Critics argue the operation may have relied too heavily on aerial tools that the Tarkin is uniquely capable of defeating. Others question whether the search was suspended too early, or whether the assumption of impenetrability became an excuse rather than a conclusion. As of January 2026, the phone rests inside a forensic laboratory. And nothing about the process is simple. Because of its age and prolonged exposure to moisture, technicians cannot safely power it on. Instead, they are performing a painstaking chip-off extraction, physically removing memory components from the device to bypass damaged circuitry. One mistake could erase everything. The process moves millimeter by millimeter, hour by hour. Everyone is holding their breath. If the data survives, it may reveal the digital last known point, the final GPS coordinates, messages sent or attempted, as daylight faded in June 2023. It may tell us whether Céline was moving, searching desperately for signal, or waiting in one place for help that never came. But the phone's impact extends beyond its data. Its discovery has already triggered a new, hyper-focused search of the gully where it was found. Rob Parsons and Ken Gamble are no longer fringe figures. They have become catalysts. And Tasmanian police, once confident the forest had yielded all it would, have been forced to return, knowing now that the impenetrable terrain had already been breached by a civilian with patience and resolve. The case of Céline Cremer has changed. It is no longer just a tragedy. It has become a testament to persistence over protocol, to humility over certainty. In an age dominated by satellites, algorithms, and aerial surveillance, this case serves as a reminder of something deeply uncomfortable. Sometimes the most powerful investigative tool is still a human being who refuses to stop looking. The Tarkin remains what it has always been: cold, dense, and dangerous. But it is no longer silent. The forest has given up its first truth, and that truth carries a promise. The answer is not gone. It is waiting for Rob Parsons, for the team at Case Reveal, for a family halfway across the world. The phone was the key. Now, we wait for the door to open.